The Channel Islands off the coast of Southern California are a hotspot for marine life. Known for their clear waters, rocky reefs, and kelp forests, they're home to seals, sea lions, and an array of fish species. Orcas, also called killer whales, occasionally visit these waters while following prey or traveling in pods. These animals are powerful and intelligent, often hunting with precision and speed. Though orcas rarely attack humans, their size and strength make them one of the ocean's most formidable predators. On September 9, 2024, Greg Harmon, a 38-year-old marine biologist, was on a diving expedition near San Miguel Island, one of the most remote in the Channel Islands chain. Greg had been studying local fish populations and kelp forest health for years. He loved the ocean and had spent countless hours diving in these waters. That morning, Greg and his dive team left the small harbor on their research boat, heading to a site known for its rich biodiversity. The team had planned a full day of diving, with Greg leading the first descent. By 8:30 a.m., the team reached the dive site. The water was calm as Greg suited up, checking his oxygen tank and securing his fins and mask. He was experienced and organized, always double-checking his gear. The team reviewed the dive plan, and Greg and two others soon entered the water. They descended slowly, the calm ocean surrounding them as they adjusted to the underwater world. Greg focused on his work, documenting fish species and examining the kelp. The underwater environment was alive with movement. Schools of small fish darted around while larger ones glided near the rocks. Greg moved further from the group to take samples, staying within sight of his dive partners. He felt at home underwater, the steady rhythm of his breathing and the regulator calming his mind. About 40 minutes into the dive, something unusual caught Greg's attention. In the distance, he saw large shapes moving toward them. At first, he thought it might be a group of dolphins, which often swam in the area. But as the shapes grew closer, Greg realized they were orcas. There were 3 of them, their distinct black and white bodies moving gracefully through the water. Greg stayed calm, watching them from a distance. Orcas were rare in this part of the Channel Islands, and he felt excitement and caution. He signaled to his team to stay alert as the orcas swam closer. The animals were massive, their dorsal fins towering above their sleek bodies. They moved in unison, circling slowly. Greg kept still, not wanting to provoke them. One orca broke away from the pod, swimming toward him. Its movements were deliberate, and Greg felt a sudden spike of fear. The orca circled him, its black eyes locked on him. Greg's instincts told him something wasn't right. He began to back away slowly, trying to distance himself and the animal more. Without warning, the orca lunged. Its powerful jaws clamped onto Greg's leg, the force knocking him backward. Pain shot through him as the orca's teeth tore into his wetsuit and flesh. The attack was quick but devastating, leaving Greg disoriented. His regulator slipped from his mouth and water rushed in as he struggled to breathe. The orca thrashed, pulling him through the water like a rag doll before releasing him. Greg's body went limp momentarily as he tried to process what had just happened. Blood clouded the water around him and his vision blurred from the pain. He kicked weakly, trying to push himself away from the orca, but his leg was severely injured. The animal circled back, its massive body brushing against him. Greg's dive partners sprang into action. One swam toward him, grabbing his arm and pulling him away from the orca. The other diver created a distraction, banging on a metal rod to draw the orca's attention. The tactic worked momentarily, giving Greg's rescuer enough time to drag him closer to the surface. The orca stayed. It followed them, its movement slower but still menacing. Greg struggled to stay conscious, his body racked with pain and cold. The ascent to the surface felt endless, every second filled with the fear that the orca would strike again. When they finally broke the surface, the boat crew spotted them immediately. The divers shouted for help, and the crew threw down a rescue line. Greg's strength was almost gone as the team hauled him onto the boat. Blood poured from his leg, staining the deck as the crew worked to stabilize him. They wrapped his leg tightly, trying to stop the bleeding, and radioed for emergency help. The orcas lingered near the boat, their dorsal fins cutting through the water. The crew watched nervously, unsure if the animals would attack again. One orca surfaced briefly, its head rising above the water as if to observe the commotion. Then, just as suddenly as they had appeared, the orcas swam away, disappearing into the depths. Greg lay on the deck, shivering and barely conscious. His teammates stayed by his side, applying pressure to his wound and monitoring his breathing. The Coast Guard arrived about 20 minutes later, airlifting Greg to a hospital in Ventura. His injuries were severe, with deep lacerations and broken bones in his leg. Though the team's quick action saved his life, the attack shook everyone. Orca attacks on humans were exceedingly rare, and the encounter raised questions among researchers. What had caused the orca to act so aggressively? Was it a case of mistaken identity, or had something else triggered the attack? For Greg, the experience was a stark reminder of the unpredictable nature of the ocean and its most powerful predators. November 2, 2024, the winds howled in the bleak areas of Cape Cod, Massachusetts. Those who ventured close to the notorious areas where the Atlantic met the coast could breathe in the salty air that clung to everything. Despite Cape Cod's long-standing reputation for beauty, it had come to represent something much darker. As the number of great white sharks increased, so did the sightings, close encounters, and at times fatal attacks. The promise of wild waves and the attraction of the unknown attracted thrill-seeking surfers to its shores despite the warnings. Emma Waverly and Lisa Kearns were two surfers familiar with these waters. Both women were in their early 30s and had traveled the world, from the tropical beaches of Hawaii to the rocky shores of Australia in search of waves. Despite hearing them, they disregarded the warnings that shark activity had increased along Cape Cod. Their playground and haven was the ocean, which they felt could not be taken away from them by any creature, no matter how terrifying. It was late afternoon when they reached Race Point Beach, a remote sand beach close to Provincetown, as the sun was slowly lowering itself toward the horizon. Historically, Race Point Beach was not a popular tourist destination because of its dangerous currents and large waves. Emma and Lisa were among the few on the beach who dared to enter the water. To a casual observer, the scene might have seemed peaceful, with the crisp bite of late autumn in the air, the sky painted in shades of pink and orange, and waves crashing in rhythmic succession. However, something much more dangerous was hiding beneath the surface. Shark sightings had increased over the past month, especially of great white sharks lured closer to shore by the warm waters and many seals. The surfing community, which saw the risk as part of the excitement, frequently ignored local authorities' warnings. Having surfed Cape Cod numerous times, Emma and Lisa were sure they could handle any challenge the ocean presented. Eager to catch the season's final strong swell, they boarded, suited up, and dove into the water. The sky darkened, and the beach became increasingly empty as they paddled past the breakers. The only other surfer still in the water was a young man named Joel, who had mounted a tiny GoPro camera on his board to record the day's surf. The peaceful evening would soon become a nightmare due to the hunger of an apex predator watching them. Attracted by the smell of the seals in the vicinity, the great white shark circled the area for hours. It hunted in these waters, and anything that moved on the water's surface could be its meal. The shark was a powerful creature, nearly 18 feet long and weighing over 2,000 pounds, motivated only by instinct and an unquenchable hunger. Emma and Lisa unknowingly entered the predator's territory as they paddled farther from the coast. Suddenly, it appeared out of nowhere. Emma felt an immense force hit her from below, causing her to lose balance and plunge into the churning water. The impact was so intense that it took her a moment to comprehend what had happened. With a single devastating bite, the shark's strong jaws clamped down on her body with terrifying efficiency. Her board, broken in two, drifted nearby as a dark red pool spread around her. Emma was dragged beneath the surface and vanished into the depths before she could even scream. At the sound of the impact, Lisa, only a few feet away, turned to see the water around her friend turning red. She was overcome with sheer terror and began frantically paddling toward the shore. But the shark persisted, drawn by the taste of blood, rushing at her with incredible speed, its dorsal fin slicing through the water like a knife. The shark lunged from the water, jaws wide open, and clamped down on Lisa's midsection before she could react. In a brutal instant, her body was torn apart. Joel, the young surfer observing from a distance, was left in shock as the horrifying scene unfolded before him. His GoPro camera, still recording, captured every agonizing detail: the violent thrashing, the blood, and the predator's immense power. By the time the shark disappeared beneath the waves, leaving only a trail of blood and broken boards, both women had perished, their bodies torn apart by the vicious attack. The people in the community were shocked by what happened that day. Within hours, news outlets nationwide were covering the tragedy as word of the attack spread. When Joel's GoPro footage was shown on national television, it sparked a heated discussion about beach safety and the dangers of entering areas where these dangerous predators were known to gather. Marine biologists and environmentalists suggested that shark attacks might have risen due to shifts in aquatic ecosystems and climate change. As waters warmed, prey species like seals moved closer to the coast, drawing sharks to follow. Some experts advocated more substantial restrictions on beach access during periods of high shark activity, while others contended that the great whites were just acting on their instincts. Authorities issued fresh warnings about the perils of surfing in shark-infested waters and temporarily closed Race Point Beach and the surrounding areas after the attack. The attack rekindled the question of whether or not people should be permitted to enter such hazardous environments without improved safeguards. However, many surfers were unfazed. Seeing the ocean as the ultimate frontier where taking risks was a natural part of the sport. That risk had been lethal for Emma and Lisa, another terrible reminder of the wild and erratic nature of the ocean. The tragedy was a stark reminder of the fine line between danger and adventure. The great white shark, a species that has ruled the oceans for millions of years, had once again asserted its dominance. Waters off the coast of South Australia are home to some of the world's most giant great white sharks. These apex predators, known for their incredible speed and powerful jaws, have made this area famous among divers. People around the globe visit Port Lincoln to experience cage diving, a chance to get up close with these majestic but fearsome creatures. On October 19, 2024, two seasoned divers, Emma Callahan and Sarah Briggs, arrived at the marina, ready for what they hoped would be the adventure of a lifetime. Emma and Sarah, both in their early 30s, had been friends since college and shared a love for the ocean. They'd been diving together for years, exploring coral reefs and deep-sea caves. This was their first time cage diving with great whites. That morning, they joined a small group on a boat operated by South Coast Expeditions, a well-known company specializing in shark tours. The day was calm, and the crew chatted with the divers about safety measures and the unique behaviors of great whites. Great white sharks are drawn to these waters by abundant seals and fish. The crew explained that the sharks' heightened senses, especially their ability to detect vibrations, often make them curious about human activity. Though cage diving is considered safe, everyone must respect the animals and avoid sudden movements that could draw too much attention. By mid-morning, the boat anchored near Neptune Islands, a hotspot for shark sightings. The crew began baiting the water with chunks of fish known as chumming to attract sharks. Emma and Sarah, dressed in wetsuits, were pulling on their masks and tanks. They laughed nervously as they helped each other secure their gear. The first group of divers entered the water, descending into the cage suspended beside the boat. The women watched intently, waiting their turn. When it was their time, Emma and Sarah climbed down the narrow ladder into the cage, their fins splashing slightly as they settled inside. The cage was small, with metal bars separating them from the open water. The women held onto the bars, peering into the blue expanse, their breaths loud through the regulator. At first, everything was calm. A few smaller sharks swam by, their sleek bodies gliding effortlessly through the water. The women signaled to each other, excited by the close encounter. As time passed, more giant sharks began to appear. A massive great white, estimated to be about 15 feet long, swam closer to the cage. Its movements were slow and deliberate, its eyes black and unblinking. Emma tapped Sarah's shoulder, pointing toward the shark as it turned sharply, circling the cage. The creature's presence was electrifying but intimidating. Its sheer size made the cage feel smaller. The boat crew above observed, shouting updates to those in the cage. The shark's behavior shifted. It became more aggressive. It began bumping the cage with its snout, testing the structure. Emma and Sarah clutched the bars. Their excitement turned to unease. The crew banged on the side of the boat, attempting to distract the shark, but it seemed fixated on the cage. Suddenly, the shark surged forward, its jaws snapping at the metal bars. The force of the attack sent vibrations through the cage. Emma tried to back away, but there was nowhere to go. The shark struck again, its teeth scraping against the metal. The women's breathing quickened as they realized the cage might not hold. Above water, the crew scrambled to pull the cage up, but the shark was relentless. In a horrifying moment, the shark's powerful jaws clamped onto one of the bars, bending it just enough to create an opening. Emma screamed as the shark lunged forward, grabbing her arm. The force yanked her through the gap, and the regulator ripped from her mouth. Sarah reached out, trying to hold on to her friend, but the shark thrashed violently, pulling Emma into open water. Sarah was frozen for a moment, her mind racing. Then she grabbed the cage bars, desperately trying to climb out. The shark returned before she could reach the ladder, slamming into the cage. The impact knocked Sarah off balance, and she fell back into the water. The cage swayed dangerously, the opening from the bent bar now wide enough for the shark to push through. The shark returned with terrifying speed, its jaws closing around Sarah's leg. She kicked wildly, her screams muffled by the regulator. The predator dragged her out of the cage, blood clouding the water as she disappeared into the depths. Emma was nowhere to be seen. Above, the crew shouted orders, frantically trying to reel the cage back to the boat. Another shark had appeared, drawn by the commotion. The water churned with activity, and the surface splattered with blood. The other divers on board watched in horror, unable to do anything but wait for the crew's next move. The boat crew launched a small rescue dinghy, hoping to locate the woman. They scanned the water, their radios crackling as they called for help. Minutes felt like hours as they circled the area. But there was no sign of Emma or Sarah. The only evidence of the attack was the damaged cage and the crimson stain in the water. By the time authorities arrived, it was clear there was little hope. The divers were gone, claimed by the ocean and its most fearsome predator. The crew was devastated, their faces pale as they recounted the events. Though cage diving was known for its safety record, this incident reminded everyone of the unpredictable nature of the wild. The tragedy left a lasting mark on the diving community. Emma Callahan and Sarah Briggs, experienced and careful divers, had trusted the cage to protect them. But the power of the great white shark, driven by instinct and strength, proved overwhelming. That day, the waters off South Australia became the site of a rare and brutal breach, a chilling reminder of the ocean's untamed power. 25th, 2024. The seasoned crew aboard the fishing vessel Horizon's Edge embarked on another night patrol in the deep waters off the coast of Florida. The crew comprised experienced fishermen who had spent years working together. Captain Mike Dawson, a man in his 50s known for his deep knowledge of the sea and its mysteries, was at the helm. Mike's calm demeanor put his crew at ease, even during the toughest conditions. He had seen many things in his career, but always looked for the unexpected. The crew comprised Jake, the first mate in his 30s. He had a natural fishing talent, having worked on boats since his teens. Enthusiastic and sharp-eyed, he often spotted unusual things before others. Emily, the ship's biologist in her late 20s, was passionate about marine life and provided valuable insights into sea creatures. Tom, a reliable deckhand in his 40s, was known for his strength and always ensured the crew's safety during their shifts. On this particular night, the atmosphere was calm, with the moon shining brightly over the water. The crew was focused on their duties, preparing their gear for a routine catch. However, something unusual caught their attention as they moved further from shore. Using their night vision equipment, they noticed a large mass moving beneath the surface. Piqued by curiosity, they decided to approach cautiously. The crew was shocked to see a school of unnaturally large sharks swimming together as they got closer. Their size and how they moved in unison were unlike anything the crew had ever witnessed. It was as if the sharks were exhibiting coordinated behavior, which raised alarms in Emily's mind. She began to speculate about what could be causing this strange phenomenon. Tension hung in the air as the crew watched the sharks, their instincts warning them of potential danger. Suddenly, without warning, one of the sharks lunged out of the water and attacked one of the sailors leaning over the side of the boat. The crew erupted into chaos, shouting in horror as they rushed to help their colleague. The attack was swift and brutal, sending shockwaves of fear through everyone aboard the Horizon's Edge. Captain Mike barked orders for the crew to retreat to safety in the frenzy, but the panic was palpable. They quickly grabbed emergency equipment and desperately called for backup. The situation was unprecedented, and the crew realized they were facing something never documented in marine biology. The sheer size and aggression of the sharks indicated that they were not acting normally. With the vessel now in a state of emergency, the crew had to come together and devise a plan to protect themselves. Mike and Jake took charge, assessing the injuries and ensuring everyone was accounted for. Emily's scientific knowledge began to kick in as she tried to figure out why the sharks behaved this way. She wondered if something in the environment had triggered this unusual behavior. As the crew worked to stabilize the situation, they couldn't shake the fear of what they were dealing with. They were not just fishermen anymore. They were caught fighting for survival against an aggressive force of nature. The night that had started so calmly had turned into a nightmare, and the mystery of the sharks loomed large in their minds. The horizon's edge was now in uncharted waters, literally and metaphorically, and the crew knew they had to find a way to survive the night. The crew quickly gathered their wits to formulate a plan as the chaos continued on the horizon's edge. Captain Mike assessed the situation, realizing that they needed to move fast. The injured sailor was in shock, and they had to get him to safety. Jake and Tom worked together to pull the sailor away from the boat's edge, keeping him calm despite the chaos surrounding them. Emily used her training to check the sailor's injuries, applying pressure to stop the bleeding. She knew they had to act quickly to prevent further harm. The sight of the large, aggressive shark swimming close to the boat made her heart race, but she forced herself to stay focused. She recalled her studies about shark behavior and understood that something was wrong in the ocean. These sharks were not acting like normal predators. They were coordinated and appeared to be hunting as a group. With the injured sailor stabilized, Mike ordered the crew to raise the anchor and prepare to leave the area. They needed to get away from the sharks and find a safer spot. As the crew worked to maneuver the boat, the tension in the air was thick with fear. Every splash of water or sudden movement sent a jolt of anxiety through them. Just as they thought they might be able to escape, the sharks circled the boat again, showing no signs of retreat. Their large bodies moved in sync beneath the water, creating a sense of unease among the crew. It was as if the sharks knew of their presence and would not let them leave easily. The crew quickly realized they were facing an attack and a mysterious behavior that could threaten their survival. Mike steered the boat away from the area with the engine roaring to life, hoping to distance themselves from the aggressive school of sharks. However, the sharks followed closely, indicating they needed to be finished. Emily's mind raced as she wondered why these sharks acted this way. She knew that environmental changes could affect marine life, but what could have caused such a dramatic shift in behavior? Emily quickly jotted down her observations as they sped away, documenting everything she could about the sharks' actions. She understood that this incident could lead to significant discoveries about marine biology. But right now, her main concern was the safety of her crew. After an eternity, the crew finally reached a quieter part of the water. The sharks seemed to lose interest, allowing the crew to sigh in relief. They quickly anchored the boat and assessed the damage. The injured sailors needed immediate medical attention, but they had managed to escape the jaws of danger. Once they were safe, the crew gathered to discuss what had just happened. They shared their thoughts on the sharks' unusual behavior and speculated about the reasons behind it. Emily suggested that water temperature or pollution changes might drive the sharks to act aggressively. The crew agreed they must report their findings to the local marine authorities. The aftermath of the encounter was not just about surviving the night. It was about understanding the implications of their experience. The crew had faced a terrifying ordeal that could have ended in tragedy, but they emerged with a newfound respect for the power of nature. They realized they needed to be more cautious and aware of their environmental impact. The crew members were determined to share their story as they returned to shore. They hoped that by raising awareness about the behavior of these sharks, they could contribute to protecting marine life and the safety of those who ventured out to sea. Summer of 2010, Bondi Beach in Sydney was alive with the vibrant energy of locals and visitors. The waves from the Pacific Ocean glistened off the golden sands as the Australian sun beat down on them. Bondi had long served as a gathering place for surfers, including experienced pros and enthusiastic beginners hoping to ride their first wave. The beach's regular breaks and generally safe waters had earned it a reputation as the ideal location for surf schools over the years. That sense of security, however, would be shattered that day. On this particular day, 8 inexperienced surfers from Wave Rider Academy arrived for their lesson. Among them were Alyssa Marlowe, a local who had wanted to learn to surf since she was a young girl, and Rory Jansen, a 21-year-old tourist from Denmark. As usual, the day started with a safety briefing and some sand drills, followed by the instructors diving into the water under the guidance of the experienced and courteous Leo Kavanaugh. Activity was booming in Bondi. Swimmers filled the shallows, surfers dotted the horizon, and lifeguards patrolled along the beach. But something darker was hiding behind the breakers. Nobody knew a tiger shark had been lured nearer to the coast that morning. A seal that had been hurt had washed up on the beach's northern end a few days prior, leaving a faint blood trail largely invisible. The shark had been drawn to this scent despite its slightness. Due to their voracious appetite, tiger sharks frequently scavenged in coastal waters, especially during food scarcity. In blissful ignorance, the beachgoers carried on with their day. After Leo led the group into the water, they paddled in short, steady strokes. Gentle waves, perfect for novices, rolled in. The first person in the group to catch a wave was Rory, who was standing near the front. He rose to his feet, arms outstretched, riding the wave with a wide grin. Behind him, Alyssa made several attempts but kept losing her balance. Leo moved from student to student, offering advice and encouragement, though his voice barely cut through the sound of the surf. But then, something changed. At first, it was so subtle that nobody noticed. After paddling back out following his successful ride, Rory felt an odd tug beneath his board. He looked down and saw nothing unusual. The seabed was visible beneath him, and the water was clear. Thinking it was just the current, he dismissed it. Then chaos erupted in a matter of seconds. The tiger shark emerged from the water like a torpedo, striking violently. It went after a young man named Caleb Foster, one of the students at the rear of the group. When the shark's jaws clamped down on Caleb's leg, he was violently dragged from his board and into the water. Everyone nearby was drawn to the sudden splashing and thrashing, though the crashing waves muffled the scream that followed. Leo's heart raced as he turned to see the water behind Caleb turning red. Without hesitation, he yelled for everyone to get to shore. Panic spread instantly. Boards were abandoned as students scrambled to paddle back toward the beach, their movements frantic and uncoordinated. Driven by instinct and the scent of blood, the shark struck again. This time it lunged at Alyssa, who struggled to orient herself. Her heart stopped the instant it brushed against her leg. She was knocked off her board by the force of the collision, though the shark did not bite. Her mind raced with the horrifying realization that she was in the presence of a predator as she thrashed in the water, struggling to breathe. When Leo noticed Alyssa in trouble, he paddled frantically toward her. He reached her just as the shark turned around. Pulling her toward him, he grabbed her surfboard's leash and shoved her onto his board. Together they paddled, with Leo's eyes constantly scanning the water for the shark. Back on shore, Rory saw Caleb still in the water, struggling to stay afloat. His leg was gushing blood and the shark was circling once more. A wave of guilt swept over Rory. He wanted to help, but fear rooted him to the spot. He could hear shouts from the beach, lifeguards sprinting toward the water, their rescue boards in hand, but they were still too far away. Then, as quickly as it had started, the attack was over. The shark left a trail of blood and chaos before vanishing into the depths. When 2 lifeguards arrived, they dragged the barely conscious Caleb out of the water. He was rapidly losing blood and his leg was mangled. An ambulance arrived within minutes, and he was rushed to St. Vincent's Hospital, where doctors would later fight to save his limb. Before, the beach was alive with tourists laughing and waves crashing. But now it was eerily quiet. Authorities secured the area and promptly shut down the surf school. Reports of the attack flooded the local news in the following days. Marine biologists hypothesized that the shark's actions were likely connected to the injured seal that had been seen a few days prior after experts were called in to assess the situation. Sharks were moving closer to the coast in pursuit of food due to the increased urbanization along Australia's shorelines. The survivors endured significant emotional trauma. The attack left Rory, who had traveled to Australia in search of adventure, haunted. He struggled to fall asleep in the following weeks as his thoughts continually replayed the events. Alyssa was profoundly impacted. She used to be fascinated by the ocean and excited to be in it, but now she was afraid of it. She found it impossible to go back into the water. The incident caused Leo and the other surf school members to reevaluate their safety procedures. They improved communication with nearby lifeguards and implemented new protocols to ensure the water was carefully inspected for hazards before each class. Months later, the surf school reopened, but the memory of that day lingered with them all. Meanwhile, Caleb faced a long and challenging recovery. His days of surfing were behind him, but he would eventually regain the ability to walk. However, he would never fully heal from the emotional and physical scars. While the attack was a stark reminder of the ocean's unpredictable nature and the inherent dangers of venturing into its depths, the community rallied in support. Ultimately, the event marked a tragic chapter in Bondi's history, where humans and nature had always maintained a fragile balance. On April 10, 2024, a team of marine biologists aboard the Sequest submarine set out on an exciting mission to explore the deep waters off the coast of California. They aimed to study a newly discovered shark species rumored to possess unique intelligence. The team comprised 4 professionals, each passionate about marine life and exploration. Dr. Rachel Hayes, the lead marine biologist, had over a decade of experience studying shark behavior. Known for her innovative methods, she sought to protect marine habitats by understanding these creatures. Dr. James Lee, a marine ecologist, focused on sharks' roles in aquatic ecosystems, while Mia Patel, an oceanographer, specialized in using technology to analyze ocean habitats. Lastly, Tom, an experienced submarine pilot, ensured the crew's safety and navigation of the submarine. The team marveled at the underwater beauty as the submarine descended into the ocean's depths. Brightly colored fish darted past, and corals swayed with the currents. After a few hours, they arrived at the designated research site, where signs of the new shark species had been detected. Excitement filled the team as they prepared to gather samples and collect data. Suddenly, an unexpected mechanical failure struck Sequest. Alarms blared and lights flickered. Tom quickly checked the systems, but it became clear they were stranded deep in the ocean. Panic began to spread as the team realized the gravity of the situation. They were surrounded by unknown and potentially dangerous marine creatures in the depths. The tension increased when they spotted a school of large sharks circling the submarine. These sharks were unlike any they had encountered before. Their movements were coordinated, and they appeared aggressively guarding their territory. Fear gripped the team as they realized they were dealing with a mechanical crisis and facing intelligent, dangerous predators. With limited oxygen and failing technology, the team knew they had to act quickly. Gathering around the control panel, they worked on a plan to escape. While James analyzed the data they had collected, Mia checked the emergency systems, hoping to send a distress signal. Rachel reminded the team to remain calm and work together. Their survival depended on combining their expertise and staying focused. As the crew worked to find solutions, the sharks outside continued to circle, their presence a constant reminder of the dangers lurking in the deep. What began as a mission to study a new species quickly turned into a fight for survival against the harsh realities of the ocean. Once filled with wonder, the underwater world had become a place of fear and urgency. With the sharks growing more aggressive and time running out, the crew had to find a way to escape before their situation worsened. They knew that every second counted as they raced against time. As the team aboard the Sequest submarine gathered their thoughts, they knew they had to act quickly. The sharks outside continued circling, and the constant sound of water against the hull only heightened their anxiety. Tom quickly assessed their remaining options, reminding the crew they still had some emergency tools and equipment. Mia examined the sonar and communication systems, hoping they could send a distress signal. While the main systems were down, she searched for any way to reach the surface for help. Meanwhile, Dr. Rachel Hayes closely observed the sharks through the small viewports. She noticed their aggressive and intelligent behavior, and realized the sharks were not acting randomly. They used the ocean's darkness to their advantage, working together, which both fascinated and terrified her. Mia suggested creating noise and vibrations to distract the sharks. theorizing it could give them a chance to escape. The crew agreed it was worth a try. They gathered materials and prepared a device typically used for research to emit sound waves in the water. As they activated the device, the sound echoed through the depths. The sharks paused, reacting to the noise. For a brief moment, the tension lifted as the sharks swam away from the submarine, drawn to the distraction. The team felt a surge of hope as they realized their plan might work, but they knew the diversion wouldn't last long. Rachel and James quickly took charge, preparing to navigate the submarine back toward the surface while the sharks were distracted. Tom carefully monitored the controls, guiding the vessel upward with precision. The team communicated constantly, staying focused as they ascended through the dark water. The sounds of the ocean surrounded them, and their survival weighed heavily on each of them. However, just as they started to gain momentum, the distraction device began to fail. Mia noticed the sound waves diminishing, and panic surged through the crew as the sharks sensed the change. They began to return, moving more aggressively toward the submarine. Time was running out, and the team realized their window of opportunity was closing fast. Rachel quickly adapted their plan. She suggested using the remaining emergency oxygen to create bubbles, hoping it would obscure the sharks' vision long enough for them to escape. It was a risky maneuver, but the crew had no other choice. Working together, they released bubbles into the water as they continued their ascent. As they neared the surface, the team felt renewed hope. The bubbles created a temporary barrier, confusing the sharks. The ocean surface came closer with every passing moment, and the light of day began to break through the darkness. Finally, they breached the surface, and sunlight flooded the submarine. The crew erupted in relief, knowing they had escaped. Though their ordeal was over, they realized how fragile the balance between humanity and nature could be. Their experience had changed them, giving them a deeper respect for the creatures of the ocean. Rachel, determined to share their findings, knew this mission had uncovered valuable insights into marine life and sharks' intelligence. Their journey had just begun. In 2001, the Atmosphere and Ocean Majesty Marine Park was charged with palpable excitement, as if the entire town was pulsating with the thrum of an electric current. This year was marked by clear skies and sunny days, setting the perfect backdrop for the season's most awaited event. Today was no ordinary day at the park. It was the debut of Titan, a colossal orca recently transferred from another marine reserve specifically for this event. Titan's reputation preceded him. He was known for his impressive size, abilities, and unpredictable nature, which only heightened the anticipation and suspense surrounding his performance. This combination of factors promised an unforgettable show, drawing an eager crowd all set to witness Titan's majestic prowess in action. Parents and children were ready with cameras to capture the moment. The sun shone brightly and cast shimmering reflections in the pool. The day was perfect for a show. Sarah Jennings was a mixture of excitement and nervousness as she prepared for the show backstage. She spent weeks with Titan to learn his quirks and gain his trust. She wore a bright blue wetsuit that matched her determination. The show started as the clock struck 3. Sarah entered the arena confidently, waving at the cheering audience. Titan jumped gracefully out of the water after she gave the signal. The audience erupted in applause. Sarah sat on Titan's back and they performed stunning dives. As the show neared its conclusion, the energy level changed. The cheers of the crowd grew louder and the clapping increased. Titan, a sensitive orca, began to become agitated. He ignored Sarah's orders. Sarah touched his snout lightly as a gesture of comfort between them. The noise continued to grow. The speakers blared music and children screamed with delight. Titan, overwhelmed by the situation, acted out. He grabbed Sarah's foot in his mouth during a routine dive. This was not done out of aggression, but rather confusion and fear. The audience gasped in confusion, not knowing if it was part of the performance. Sarah struggled with her release and she called out to the other trainers in her heartbeat. Titan dove, pulling her underwater swiftly. Sarah tried to stay calm underwater. She knew panicking would make the situation worse. She gently stroked Titan's head to reconnect with her gentle giant. Above them was a flurry of activity as her team desperately tried to solve the crisis. Sarah was under pressure underwater as she struggled to resist Titan's grip. Only her training as an orca trainer kept Sarah calm in this dangerous situation. She knew that sudden movements might trigger a hostile response from an already distressed orca. Above the water, the crowd was in a quiet silence. The excitement of earlier had been replaced with a cloud of worry. Parents covered their kids' eyes, and whispers about worry spread throughout the stands. Staff at the marine park worked tirelessly to get Titan to let Sarah go. They offered him food and threw his favorite toys to get his attention. Submerged and out of oxygen, Sarah realized she had to conserve her energy and oxygen. She resisted the urge to fight and stayed as still as possible, trying to calm herself and the orca holding her. She was desperate for answers as her air was rapidly running out. The control room decided to dim the music and calm the crowd using the announcer. Titan's agitation began to decrease as the environment changed. Once frenzied with confusion, his eyes began to return to normal. Michael Andrews, the trainer in charge, appeared to be urgently directing the rescue operation. His voice was steady as he issued commands, and he carried the weight and urgency of the situation with determination, focused on saving his friend and colleague. The tension increased as the minutes passed. Sarah's lungs were screaming for air, and Titan's grip began to loosen as Sarah's consciousness started to fade. It was almost tangible that his behavior had changed, as if suddenly he realized he wasn't in danger. With a last-ditch effort, the trainers diverted Titan long enough to allow Sarah to escape. The emergency response team was there to help her as she gasped for air. As the crowd watched her surface, they erupted in applause, relief, and cries. Sarah was taken to a medical station, and the show abruptly ended. The park released statements to the media and the shocked audience explaining that the strange behavior was a reaction to the loud noises and promising to review their animal care protocol. Titan was then closely monitored and given extra training in the weeks following to help him better adapt to the stress of performing. Sarah took a short leave to reflect on her traumatic experience. She returned to the show with a renewed dedication to animal welfare and a desire to change how the shows are conducted to prevent incidents like this. Marine park staff learned an essential lesson about crowd control and animal behavior. They revised their guidelines to prioritize the comfort and safety of the animals and the humans who handle them. Titan performed under stricter conditions, and all staff were better informed about the signs of animal distress. The tragic event between Sarah and Titan forged a bond based on mutual respect and shared experience. It could have been much different. Ocean Majesty Marine Park staff and community will always remember the day that the line was drawn between safety and entertainment in the Orca Pool. In the summer of the vast expanse of the Arctic spread out in a white wilderness, a landscape so untouched and pristine that it seemed otherworldly. Here, on a remote island encased in ice and snow, Alex, a dedicated documentary filmmaker, had set up his base camp. His mission was to capture the elusive and intimate moments of a colony of seals during mating season. This endeavor promised rare and breathtaking footage. With his camera gear meticulously checked and survival equipment stowed away, Alex embarked on what he hoped would be a career-defining project. The seals were gathered on a vast stretch of frozen shoreline, their slick bodies contrasting sharply against the snow-covered ground. Few humans had ever witnessed this sight firsthand. The seals were busy with ritualistic displays and vocalizations, oblivious to the biting cold and howling winds that swept across the ice. Alex, bundled in layers of thermal gear, carefully navigated the treacherous terrain, his camera capturing the intricate dance of nature. Days passed in a blur of icy winds and breathtaking scenes. Alex became a silent observer, blending into the landscape, his presence barely noted by the seals. The camera's lens allowed him to see the world from a perspective few ever experienced, capturing the raw beauty and harsh realities of life in the Arctic. He documented the nurturing bond between mothers and their pups, the playful antics of younger seals, and the majestic yet brutal battles between males vying for dominance. One frigid morning, as the pale sun barely peeked over the horizon, Alex spotted a massive male seal that seemed to command the attention of the entire colony. This alpha male was an awe-inspiring figure with battle scars etched into his thick hide. Alex knew that getting footage of this dominant seal would be a highlight of his documentary. He approached cautiously, mindful of the animal's territorial nature. Sensing an unfamiliar presence, the alpha male lifted its head and locked eyes with Alex. The filmmaker's heart pounded as he continued to film, inching closer for a better shot. He knew the risks, but was driven by the promise of capturing something extraordinary. Suddenly the seal bellowed, a deep resonant sound that echoed across the ice. It was a warning, clear and unmistakable. Before Alex could react, the massive seal charged, its bulk moving slowly across the frozen ground. Alex's instinct for self-preservation kicked in. He swung his camera, hoping to deter the animal. The seal's attack was relentless, and the camera equipment offered little protection. Alex stumbled, falling hard onto the ice. Pain shot through his leg where the seal's powerful jaws had clamped down, tearing through his thick clothing. Desperation surged through him as he used his tripod to fend off the aggressive seal, each movement a struggle against the searing pain and rising panic. He knew he had to get away, to put distance between himself and the enraged animal. With great effort, he scrambled to his feet, using the tripod to keep the seal at bay as he backed away slowly. The alpha male eventually relented, returning to its territory, but the damage was done. Alex's leg throbbed with pain, the cold seeping into his bones through the torn fabric. The journey back to camp was an agonizing test of endurance and willpower. The extreme cold gnawed at him, sapping his strength and clarity. Though designed for the harsh conditions, his survival gear offered little solace against the pain radiating from his leg. Each step was a battle, his breath forming vapor clouds in the frigid air. Navigating the icy landscape was treacherous. The once familiar terrain seemed like a labyrinth, and each snowdrift and ice formation was a potential hazard. Alex relied on his survival skills, honed over years of filming in extreme environments. The sky darkened, the brief Arctic day giving way to a long, frigid night. Alex knew that stopping was not an option. If he paused, the cold would claim him. He pressed on, his mind focused on reaching his camp. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Alex spotted the outline of his base camp. Relief flooded through him, giving him a final burst of energy. He staggered into the camp, collapsing near his tent. With trembling hands, he unpacked his first aid kit and began treating his wounds. The bite marks were deep, and infection was a real risk in the harsh conditions. He cleaned the wounds as best he could, applying antiseptic and bandages. The pain was relentless, but Alex knew he couldn't afford to rest. He needed to secure the camp against the cold and ensure he had enough supplies to last until help could arrive. He activated his emergency beacon, a signal that would alert the nearest rescue station to his predicament. The next few days were a blur of pain and cold. Alex rationed his food and water, careful not to overexert himself. As he waited, Alex reflected on the events that had brought him to this point. The attack had been a harsh reminder of the raw power of nature, of the thin line between observer and participant in the wild. He had always known the risks, but experiencing them firsthand was a sobering lesson. Yet despite the pain and fear, he deeply respected the alpha male seal. It had been defending its territory, following instincts honed over millennia of survival in one of the harshest environments on Earth. As Alex's strength waned and hope began to dim on the fifth day, he heard the distant hum of an approaching aircraft. The sound grew louder, cutting through the wind. He staggered out of his tent, waving a brightly colored fabric to signal his location. The rescue team descended their presence, a beacon of hope in the frozen wasteland. Monmouth County, New Jersey, is a summer magnet for surfers and beachgoers. The waters of this part of the Atlantic coast are rich in fish and other marine life, making it a perfect hunting ground for predators like the great white shark. These massive sharks, sometimes growing over 15 feet long, are drawn to the area's murky shallows where seals and fish thrive. While shark sightings are common here, attacks are rare, but they are never out of the question. For surfers, the thrill of riding the waves often outweighs the risks. It was a warm morning in late summer 2024 when Ryan Whitaker, a seasoned surfer, arrived at a beach in Monmouth County. Ryan, in his mid-30s, had grown up surfing this coastline. He knew the waves here better than most, timing his sessions with the tides and swells. That morning, the waves were perfect, rolling and breaking cleanly, offering an ideal canvas for riders. Ryan parked his truck, waxed his board, and stretched on the sand. The beach was quiet except for a handful of early risers preparing to paddle out. On August 23, 2024, at around 7:30 a.m., Ryan had waded into the water, his board tucked under his arm. The ocean felt colder than usual, and the water was cloudier, stirred by the tide. He paddled beyond the breakers, scanning the horizon for the next wave. Surfing had always been a meditation for him, a moment of peace and focus. This morning felt no different. He spotted his friends, Nate and Jared, further out, their boards bobbing in the water as they waited for a set. Beneath the surface, the murky water hid a predator. Great whites often use the element of surprise when hunting. Their ability to sense movement and vibrations makes them masterful ambush hunters. In the last decade, shark activity along this stretch of coastline has increased, fueled by warmer waters and thriving prey populations. Signs posted at the beach reminded visitors to stay alert, but the warnings blended into the background for most surfers. Ryan caught his first wave of the day, carving across the face with practiced ease. As he paddled back out, he noticed the water seemed unusually still. The lull between sets often brought an eerie quiet, but today it felt heavier. A faint splash to his right caught his attention. He paused, his arms resting on his board, and glanced around. Nate and Jared were laughing, oblivious to anything unusual. Ryan shrugged off the feeling and paddled further, determined to catch the next big wave. Without warning, a massive force struck from below. The attack was swift and violent. A great white shark, estimated at over 13 feet, had risen from the depths, its jaws closing around Ryan's right leg. The pressure was overwhelming, like being crushed in a vice. Ryan screamed, the sound swallowed by the ocean as he thrashed wildly. His instincts took over and he began punching and kicking at the shark's snout, desperate to free himself. The shark's grip tightened, its teeth cutting deeper into his leg. Blood poured into the water, turning it red and thick around him. Ryan's mind raced as pain shot through his body. He knew he had to fight, or he wouldn't make it. He aimed another punch at the shark's eye, the only vulnerable spot he could think of. The shark released him momentarily, but the damage was done. His leg was shredded, the bite severing muscle, arteries, and bone. Ryan tried to paddle back toward the shore, but his strength was fading. Each movement sent waves of pain through his body. He looked down and saw the blood streaming from his leg, the water around him swirling crimson. His board drifted out of reach as he struggled to stay afloat. The shark circled back, drawn by the scent of blood. Its dorsal fin broke the surface, a chilling reminder that the attack wasn't over. Nate and Jared saw the commotion and started paddling toward Ryan, shouting and waving for help. A few onlookers noticed the splashing on the beach and ran to get the lifeguards. The shark lunged again, its massive body brushing against Ryan. He kicked weakly, his energy draining fast. Nate reached him first, grabbing his arm and pulling him onto his board. Jared joined seconds later, helping to steady Ryan as the three frantically paddled toward shore. The shark followed, its shadow visible beneath the water. Nate and Jared yelled and splashed, trying to deter it. The predator veered away but stayed close, its hunger not yet satisfied. Ryan's vision blurred as the blood loss took its toll. His friends paddled harder, shouting for help as they approached the shallows. Lifeguards waded into the surf, grabbing Ryan and hauling him onto the sand. His leg was a mangled mess, the wound gushing blood. The lifeguards worked quickly, tying a tourniquet above the bite to slow the bleeding. Ryan's face was pale, his breaths shallow. Paramedics arrived within minutes, loading him onto a stretcher and rushing him to the nearest hospital. The beach was chaotic, with surfers and beachgoers crowding around, shaken by what they had witnessed. Nate and Jared stood silently, their boards forgotten on the sand, their faces pale and tense. The shark was gone, disappearing back into the deep after the attack. In the ambulance, Ryan drifted in and out of consciousness. The paramedics worked tirelessly to stabilize him, but the damage was severe. By the time they reached the hospital, Ryan had lost a significant amount of blood. Doctors fought to save him, but the injuries proved too extensive. Hours later, news of his death spread, leaving the local surf community in shock. That day would be remembered as one of the most horrifying shark attacks in Monmouth County's history. Surfers who had once braved the waters without fear began to think twice. Great white sharks had always been a part of the ocean's ecosystem, but this attack reminded everyone of the risks of sharing the water with such mighty predators. For those who knew Ryan, the loss was devastating. A tragic end to a life spent chasing waves. It was the summer of 2005 off Hawaii's western coast, near the tiny town of Kailua Kona. A recently discovered coral reef, an ecosystem teeming with life that had not been previously documented, had brought attention to the area. The reef was located just beyond the typical dive spots in a region that had not been frequently visited, due to strong currents and erratic weather patterns. Locals had been whispering about the reef for years, praising its almost mystical beauty, but an official scientific expedition had just ventured to investigate it. The expedition was led by seasoned marine biologist Sarah Mitchell, the ideal candidate for this mission due to her years of experience researching coral ecosystems and her doctorate in aquatic ecology. Dr. Elias Brockton, a specialist in marine animals, was with her. Their crew was equipped with cutting-edge oxygen rebreathers and new underwater propulsion devices, allowing them to stay submerged for hours without coming to the surface. The team's objectives were to document the numerous fish, crustaceans, and other marine species that called this isolated reef home, and map the delicate coral formations. Each coral formation was more vibrant than the others, creating a kaleidoscope of color on the reef itself. While rays silently moved across the sandy bottom, fish swam happily through the maze of coral. However, beneath the beauty lay an unsettling silence. The typical clamor of marine life appeared to have subsided, and the waters appeared calmer than anticipated. Dr. Mitchell observed that no larger predators were present, particularly the reef sharks that used to frequent these waters. The reef shark's habitat had been further disturbed by the rise in human activity from neighboring tourist dive operations, and overfishing had severely reduced their natural prey. Sharks, generally timid animals, had become more erratic as they fought for their lives. For days, one specific shark, a sizable female reef shark, had been circling the area in distress, her agitation and hunger increasing by the hour. To investigate a portion of the reef that had not yet been recorded, the team went more profound than they had previously on the day of the incident. The stronger-than-expected currents pushed the divers slightly off course. Although Dr. Mitchell, who was always on the lookout, closely monitored their depth and oxygen levels, the team was mesmerized by the breathtaking beauty of the reef below. As they approached a particularly dense section of coral, something moved in the shadows. Brockton first spotted the shark. Initially, it was just a shadowy figure quickly moving through the water. It moved with an unsettling purpose and was more significant than most reef sharks they had seen. Dr. Mitchell gave the team the all-clear to stay motionless, hoping the shark would pass by unharmed. But this one was different. A predatory aggression had replaced its customary apprehension toward humans. The shark suddenly lunged at the group. Its streamlined body sliced through the water like a torpedo, moving with terrifying speed. Dr. Brockton was taken by surprise and barely had time to react. The shark's jaws tightened around his arm, ripping through the flesh and the neoprene of his wetsuit. A crimson cloud of blood blossomed in the water, swiftly spreading with the current. Dr. Mitchell, who had been watching in horror, soon became the shark's next target. As she attempted to reload the emergency spear gun, the shark turned on her, slamming into her side with brutal force. The impact knocked the spear gun out of her hand, and she felt the shark's teeth graze her leg. Pain shot through her body as she struggled to fend off the assault. Blood began to mix with the water around her as well, her leg now bleeding from a deep gash. Dr. Mitchell instinctively kicked at the shark, managing to push it away momentarily. She retrieved the emergency spear gun and shot the shark to scare it off rather than kill it. After the spear struck the shark's side, Dr. Mitchell and Dr. Brockton were momentarily freed from the immediate danger. The shark retreated into the deep. However, its aggression had remained. The shark then turned its fury toward other swimmers in the group, continuing its assault before finally retreating into the deeper waters. The attack injured several divers, though none as severely as Dr. Brockton and Dr. Mitchell. The team got right to work on their emergency protocol. To halt the bleeding, team medic Dr. Aidan Kovar hurried to Dr. Brockton's side and applied a makeshift tourniquet. Despite her injury, Dr. Mitchell assisted in keeping the group calm and maintaining their ascent. They had to bring both Dr. Brockton and Dr. Mitchell to the surface, but it was challenging due to the powerful currents. Also, visibility had deteriorated, with the water now obscured by blood and silt agitated by the shark's assault. Dr. Brockton was running out of time. In addition to his face being pale beneath his mask, his breathing had become irregular. Throughout the journey, the current pushed the group sideways and away from the boat. The current pushed them off their intended course as they rose, and the visibility worsened. Anxiety started to spread throughout the group. The strain of pulling Dr. Brockton and helping Dr. Mitchell through the water was wearing them down, and they could no longer see the boat above them. Dr. Mitchell knew they would lose Dr. Brockton if they reached the surface slowly. It seemed like forever before they finally cracked the surface. The boat was still far away, but the crew had already spotted them. The captain, a grizzled old sailor named Mac, maneuvered the vessel as close as possible, and the team was quickly pulled aboard. Dr. Brockton was rushed to the ship's small medical bay, where Dr. Kovar worked frantically to stabilize him. Dr. Mitchell, though injured, insisted that Dr. Brockton received priority treatment and allowed her leg to be bandaged only after he was in stable condition. The rescue helicopter arrived within 30 minutes, airlifting Dr. Brockton and Dr. Mitchell to the nearest hospital in Honolulu. Both survived, but Dr. Brockton's arm was severely damaged, requiring multiple surgeries and months of rehabilitation. While less severe, Dr. Mitchell's leg injury would also require extensive physical therapy. The incident left the team shaken. Their excitement about the reef replaced a sad understanding of the dangers beneath the water's surface. In the aftermath, the scientific community took notice of the attack. The incident led to stricter regulations for marine research in sensitive areas, including the implementation of mandatory shark deterrent systems and more comprehensive training for divers. Despite the trauma she endured, Dr. Mitchell continued her work in marine conservation, dedicating her research to exploring the effects of human activity on marine predators such as the reef shark. The expedition to the reef marked her final deep dive. From then on, she shifted her focus to advocacy, driven by a deep understanding of the delicate balance between human exploration and preserving the world's oceans. The reef remained a protected site, restricted to only the most essential research, serving as a silent reminder of the tragic day when science and nature intersected with tragic consequences. It was 2009, and fishing vessels found the North Atlantic waters more dangerous. One of the area's biggest vessels, the Atlantic Seeker, was the reputable commercial fishing company Blue Wavy Fishing. The captain of this ship, Laura Mitchell, was an experienced seafarer with over 20 years of experience in these harsh waters. The vessel was well known for its size and efficiency. Its main goal was to harvest large amounts of in-demand swordfish and tuna, but recently it had to contend with an unanticipated and dangerous threat, a persistent pod of mako sharks. As the autumn winds started to stir up the already turbulent Atlantic, the Atlantic Seeker sailed out of Halifax, Nova Scotia. The group, which included experienced fishermen like Arlo Fenton, a burly first mate, and a quick-witted engineer named Isaac Weiler, had encountered many difficulties while sailing the open ocean. But they were still determining how serious the shark issue they would deal with would be. Sharks had historically been a problem on occasion, attracted to the smell of blood and bait when the crew brought in their catch. But something about this pod of mako sharks was different. They were far more aggressive and unrelenting than the crew had ever seen. The sharks ate the leftover fish, actively attacked the nets, broke equipment, and, most alarming, circled the boat for hours after the fishing had ceased. The crew's annoyance increased after 3 weeks on the journey. Before the valuable catch could even be loaded aboard, the sharks tore into their nets, reducing the size of their hauls. Constant repairs resulted in low morale. The engineer, Isaac, mumbled that the makos appeared almost synchronized, as though they were picking up tricks on the boat. The crew now jokingly referred to them as the Wolf Pack, but the humor did little to hide the underlying fear. And then the storm hit. A sudden gust blew across the North Atlantic on a chilly October night. The Atlantic Seeker rolled erratically in the churning sea as the waves rose suddenly. With her hand steady on the wheel and her eyes searching the horizon, Captain Laura Mitchell stayed on the bridge as the storm tore apart. She had survived storms in the past, but this one was different. Sharks, in addition to the storm, made the sea feel alive beneath her. The smell of fish and the churning waters sent the makos into a frenzy, and they launched a full-scale attack on the vessel. The crew faced an even more terrifying foe, as they struggled to gather supplies and prepare for the storm. The sleek bodies of the sharks struck the boat with a startling force as they started to ram the hull. Arlo, the first mate, was nearly thrown overboard as one particularly aggressive shark attacked the lower deck, snapping its powerful jaws at anything that moved. In the chaos, crew members were injured. One man, a deckhand named Joss, was knocked unconscious when a wave hurled him against a railing. Another junior fisherman named Kellen suffered a deep gash in his leg after slipping and falling onto a broken piece of equipment. The situation was spiraling out of control. With the storm showing no signs of relenting and the sharks continuing their assault, Captain Mitchell knew they had to act fast. She ordered the crew to pull in the remaining lines and nets, but the sharks had already done significant damage. Half of the night's catch was lost, shredded by the makos, and the boat's starboard netting had been torn apart. Battling the elements and the sharks from below deck, Isaac worked tirelessly to keep the engines running, but even he knew they were pushing the Atlantic Seeker to its limits. The crew, beaten and tired, entered the ship and secured the deck. They huddled together for hours while the storm raged outside, constantly reminded of the danger beneath the waves by the sound of sharks biting into the hull. Hoping for a break in the storm and hoping the boat would hold until morning, Captain Mitchell remained on the bridge, her gaze fixed intently on the radar. The storm had passed by dawn, but the damage was inflicted. With its hull smashed, gear scattered, and crew messy, the Atlantic Seeker hobbled toward Halifax. Thankfully, there were no fatalities, even though several of the men, including Joss and Kellen, were taken to the hospital upon arrival. As the storm passed, the sharks vanished, apparently weary of their onslaught. Following this, Blue Wavy Fishing had to make a difficult choice. The crew had been put in danger, and the constant shark attacks had severely impacted the company's earnings. The board of the company and Captain Laura Mitchell agreed that a change was necessary. It was made evident by the incident that the conventional techniques were no longer viable, and that industrial fishing carries significant risks in areas where sharks are prevalent. Weeks after the event, Blue Wavy Fishing implemented new safety measures. The company invested in reinforced shark-resistant nets and installed new sonar systems to detect large predators before they could approach the vessel. They also adopted more sustainable fishing practices designed to minimize the amount of bycatch that had likely been attracting the sharks in the first place. Captain Mitchell, though outwardly stoic, was deeply impacted by the experience. For her, the ordeal was a stark reminder that the ocean, while bountiful, was also unpredictable and dangerous. The sharks had been a force of nature doing what they were meant to do, and if Blue Wavy Fishing wanted to continue operating in those waters, they had to respect that balance. Though the Atlantic Seeker eventually returned to the North Atlantic, it did so with a renewed sense of caution and responsibility. Captain Laura Mitchell continued to lead the crew, who no longer viewed the sharks as simple nuisances, but rather as an intricate and sometimes dangerous part of the ecosystem in which they had chosen to work. July 19, 2009, 4 friends, Maria Teixeira, Pedro Santos, Inés Carvalho, and João Almeida, arrived in the Azores for what was supposed to be the vacation of a lifetime. The archipelago, located off the coast of Portugal, is famous for its beautiful landscapes and pristine waters filled with marine life. After a few days of sightseeing, they decided to book a snorkeling tour to explore the ocean up close. They were excited, expecting to swim with fish and maybe catch a glimpse of dolphins. That morning, the group boarded a small boat with a local guide who assured them the waters were safe and calm. The ocean was inviting, the sky clear, and the friends could hardly wait to dive in. Their guide led them to a spot just off the coast of Fayal Island, a well-known location for snorkeling due to its crystal-clear water and vibrant coral. The guide briefly mentioned that sharks were sometimes seen in the area, but were usually harmless blue sharks, more curious than dangerous. Blue sharks are common in the waters surrounding the Azores. They are sleek, fast swimmers and generally considered non-aggressive towards humans. They feed mostly on squid and small fish. However, their curiosity can sometimes lead to closer encounters with snorkelers and divers, particularly when attracted by the movements and sounds of boats. This particular day, a blue shark had been circling near the area, drawn in by the disturbance of the boat's engine and the splashes from the group as they entered the water. The group donned their snorkeling gear and dove in, laughing and marveling at the colorful fish darting around them. Maria swam ahead, pointing out a school of fish to the others, while João floated nearby, taking in the beauty of the underwater world. Everything seemed perfect, and the experience was exactly what they had hoped for. But not far beneath them, the blue shark was watching. It approached slowly, curious about the sudden activity. At first, the shark maintained its distance, but as the group continued to swim and splash, it became bolder, moving closer with each pass. Joao was the first to notice the shadow below and gestured to the others, but they brushed it off, assuming it was just another fish. As they swam farther from the boat, the shark's behavior changed. It began to circle tighter, its sleek body moving more aggressively. Pedro, who had been enjoying the swim, felt anxious as he noticed the shark approaching. It wasn't just passing by, it was coming toward them. Panic set in when the blue shark made its first rapid approach. It darted straight toward Pedro, veering away at the last second, its tail brushing against his leg. The close encounter sent a wave of fear through the group as they realized they were no longer alone. Inez screamed into her snorkel, frantically trying to swim back toward the boat. Joao, now seeing the shark's size and speed, grabbed Maria's arm, urging her to follow. The shark was circling faster now, its curiosity replaced by predatory instinct. It swam directly beneath the group, its dark shape clear in the water, and then shot upward toward Maria. She saw it too late. The shark's sharp snout struck her side, knocking her off balance as she struggled to regain control of the water. Pedro shouted for everyone to stay together, but the group was already scattered in the chaos, trying to swim for safety. The shark made another pass, this time targeting Joao. It swam close enough for him to feel the rush of water as it brushed past. His heart pounded as he kicked furiously, trying to reach the boat. But the ship, which had seemed so close just moments before, now felt impossibly far. The shark wasn't backing off, it was hunting, and the danger increased every second they stayed in the water. Inez, struggling to keep up with the others, saw the shark's dorsal fin cut through the surface. Her breaths came in short, panicked bursts as she tried to swim faster. But the shark was faster still. It circled back, coming up from below and ramming into Pedro, its teeth grazing his leg. Blood clouded the water around them as Pedro cried out in pain, his leg throbbing from the shark's bite. With Pedro injured and the shark growing more aggressive, the group had no choice but to fight back to the boat. Joao grabbed Maria and pulled her toward the ship, shouting for Pedro and Inez to follow as fast as possible. The shark was relentless, its sleek body cutting through the water as it made another pass, this time closer to Inez. She kicked hard, desperate to escape its reach. Pedro, bleeding and exhausted, struggled to keep swimming. His leg was slowing him down and he could feel the shark getting closer again. The pain from the bite was overwhelming, but he couldn't stop. In a desperate effort, Joao grabbed Pedro's arm and dragged him toward the boat. Sensing its prey slipping away, the shark lunged, its jaws snapping shut inches from Pedro's foot. With one last burst of energy, the group reached the boat. Finally realizing the danger, the guide pulled them aboard, their bodies trembling from the adrenaline and fear. As they collapsed onto the deck, gasping for breath, the blue shark circled the boat once more before disappearing into the deep, leaving only the memory of its attack behind. The dream vacation had turned into a nightmare, but they had survived. The shark's cold eyes and relentless pursuit would haunt them, but they knew they were lucky to have escaped. On March, the beaches near Cape Town, South Africa, are world-renowned for their beauty and surf-friendly waves. Muizenberg Beach, in particular, attracts surfers of all skill levels year-round. The area is also known for great white sharks, which thrive in these waters, drawn by the large population of seals. Despite the risks, surfers regularly take to the waves, knowing the thrill of surfing often comes with the reality of sharing the water with one of nature's most fearsome predators. On July 8, 2024, 26-year-old Tom Ward, an experienced surfer and local to Cape Town, arrived at Muizenberg Beach just after dawn. Tom had been surfing since he was a teenager, and the beach felt like his second home. The conditions were perfect that morning, clean waves and a light breeze. The sun was still low, casting long shadows on the sand. Tom parked his car, grabbed his well-worn board, and headed to the shoreline. He stretched for a few minutes, warming up his shoulders and legs. A few other surfers were already in the water, their boards bobbing on the surface. Tom walked into the surf, feeling the cool water rise around his ankles and knees. He lay flat on his board and paddled out, slicing through the gentle breakers. By 7:15 a.m., Tom was sitting beyond the breaking waves, scanning the horizon for the next set. He caught his first wave carving across its face, his body moving in sync with the board. The adrenaline rush made him eager for more, and he paddled back out, positioning himself for another ride. The ocean felt calm, almost too quiet. As Tom waited, his legs dangled in the water, something surfers do instinctively. He wasn't thinking about what might be below him, but focused on the waves. Then, without warning, a powerful force struck him from below. The impact was so sudden and violent that it knocked him clean off his board. Tom plunged into the water, disoriented. He opened his eyes underwater, trying to figure out what had happened when he felt an intense, searing pain in his right thigh. A great white shark had attacked, its mighty jaws biting down and tearing into his flesh. The pain was unimaginable, sharp and all-encompassing, as the shark's teeth sank deep into his muscles. Tom screamed, his voice muffled by the water as he thrashed wildly in an attempt to break free. The shark pulled him downward, its powerful body twisting and dragging him through the water. Tom's mind raced. He knew he had to act quickly or he wouldn't survive. Summoning every ounce of strength, he kicked the shark with his free leg, striking it repeatedly near its snout. The shark's grip loosened slightly, and Tom twisted his body, forcing the predator to release him. He shot upward, desperate for air, his lungs burning as he reached the surface. Tom gasped for breath as his head broke through the water. He looked around frantically, spotting his surfboard floating a few feet away. Blood poured from the wound in his leg, clouding the water around him. He grabbed his board, using it as a flotation device, but the shark wasn't done. Its dorsal fin cut through the water like a blade, circling him. Tom's heart pounded as he clung to the board, trying to stay calm. The shark lunged again, hitting the board with its massive head. The impact sent Tom flying off, splashing back into the water. He scrambled back onto the board, using it as a shield. The shark circled closer, its movements deliberate and terrifying. Tom swung the board toward the shark's head, hitting it as hard as possible. The predator veered away but didn't leave. Other surfers in the lineup had noticed the attack and began paddling toward shore, shouting for help. A lifeguard stationed on the beach saw the commotion and sprang into action, blowing his whistle and radioing for backup. The lifeguard jumped onto a jet ski and sped toward Tom, creating a wake that momentarily distracted the shark. Tom's strength was fading. His leg was nearly useless, the muscles torn and bleeding profusely. Each second felt like an eternity as he struggled to stay afloat. The shark, sensing his weakness, moved in again. Just as it closed the distance, the jet ski roared between them. The lifeguard shouted and slapped the water with a paddle, trying to scare the predator away. The shark hesitated, then dove beneath the surface, disappearing momentarily. The lifeguard pulled alongside Tom, grabbing him and hoisting him onto the back of the jet ski. Tom collapsed, his body shaking uncontrollably from shock and blood loss. The lifeguard sped toward the shore, the engine's roar drowning out the sounds of the ocean. Behind them, the shark's dorsal fin resurfaced, trailing the jet ski for a few seconds before finally retreating into the deep. On the beach, paramedics were waiting with a stretcher. They lifted Tom off the jet ski and laid him down, working quickly to stop the bleeding. His wetsuit was shredded, and the wound on his thigh was deep, exposing muscle and bone. Blood soaked the sand beneath him as they applied a tourniquet, wrapping his leg tightly to slow the flow. Tom's face was pale, his breath shallow and uneven. The ambulance rushed Tom to the nearest hospital, sirens blaring. Meanwhile, beach officials closed Muizenberg Beach, posting warning signs and advising surfers to stay out of the water. The attack left a heavy sense of fear among the local surfing community. Shark attacks in Cape Town are not unheard of, but such a brutal and close encounter is rare. At the hospital, doctors worked urgently to save Tom's leg. His injuries were severe, with multiple lacerations and deep puncture wounds that had damaged tendons and blood vessels. Despite the extensive trauma, Tom was lucky to be alive. The quick actions of the lifeguard and paramedics had prevented the worst. The incident was a stark reminder of the risks surfers take when entering the ocean. Even in popular spots like Muizenberg Beach, where lifeguards and surfers are always present, the unpredictability of nature can turn a perfect day into a fight for survival. For Tom, the attack was a life-changing event, one he would never forget. In the summer of 2002, Jake Holloway, a seasoned kayaker and wilderness enthusiast, embarked on his final journey along the rugged coastline of Prince William Sound, Alaska. Known for its breathtaking scenery of towering glaciers, dense forests, and emerald waters, the Sound was a remote area that attracted adventurers seeking solitude and nature's raw beauty. But its isolation also carried inherent dangers: harsh weather, freezing waters, and, as Jake would soon discover, predators lurking beneath the surface. Jake had always been drawn to the wild, finding solace in the quiet places far from civilization. At 32, he had kayaked through some of the most challenging waters in the world, from the fjords of Norway to the rivers of Patagonia. He had long aspired to conquer Alaska, known for its harsh climate and erratic seas. He had spent months organizing this journey, charting his course along the wild shores of the Sound in the hopes of seeing the region's many species, including sea otters, bald eagles, and, with any luck, orcas. The journey started without incident. Equipped with his red fiberglass kayak, a dry suit, a waterproof GPS, and a week's worth of supplies, Jake launched from the small fishing village of Whittier. The weather was unusually calm. He navigated the maze of channels and inlets for days, avoiding icebergs that had broken off from neighboring glaciers. His paddle dipped rhythmically into the water, and the occasional cry of a far-off seabird was the only sound audible. Following the winding shore, he frequently walked through dense kelp beds that swayed in the current like ethereal green arms rising from the ocean floor. Here, under the shadow of the Chugach Mountains, his journey turned fatal. On the fourth day, Jake finally came upon a vast kelp forest. A storm might have been brewing in the distance as the waters had become choppier, but Jake was confident in his skills. What he didn't anticipate was worse. As he approached the thick seaweed, an enormous wave hit his kayak from the side. The blow came quickly and viciously. Jake was thrown into the frigid waters when his kayak capsized before he could react. Struggling to right his kayak after becoming disoriented and submerged, Jake found the weight of his equipment and the dense kelp forest encircling him, making it nearly impossible. Through his dry suit, the cold water seeped in, draining his strength and mental clarity. The real danger surfaced as he struggled to stay afloat. Jake was unaware that a great hammerhead shark had been silently creeping through the kelp forest. Even though they preferred warmer waters, hammerheads occasionally traveled to colder areas, such as the coastal waters of Alaska, particularly during hunting migrations. The movement and splashing from Jake's struggle had drawn the shark to the area. Unaware of the predator hiding beneath him, Jake held onto his capsized kayak while he tried to catch his breath and gather his thoughts. But then, out of his eye, he caught a glimpse of it, a vast shadowy figure approaching him with uncanny accuracy. The shark's large eyes were focused on Jake as its characteristic hammer-shaped head sliced through the water. A wave of panic swept through Jake. He kicked frantically to break free of the kelp and return to his kayak. However, the shark moved too quickly. Instantly, it struck with its powerful jaws, clamping down on Jake's leg. The pain was excruciating, a searing shock that coursed through his body. As the shark dragged him under, he screamed and flailed wildly. Jake struggled for what seemed like forever. He kicked with his free leg, punched at the shark's gills, and attempted to use the kayak as leverage to haul himself up. But the cold, blood loss, and the shark's constant attack were soon taking their toll. The water churned red around him as the hammerhead let go and circled back to attack again. Jake was losing strength. His vision became blurry and his limbs grew numb from the freezing water. His body went limp as the ocean took him in his final moments, and the shark pulled him farther away. When Jake failed to return to Whittier as scheduled, a massive search effort was launched. The Coast Guard, local fishermen, and volunteers scoured the coastline for any sign of him. Jake and his kayak were nowhere to be seen. Among the adventurers who often visited the region, his disappearance served as a sobering reminder of the harshness of the Alaskan wilderness and the perils beneath its breathtaking exterior. In the following years, Jake Holloway's story raised awareness about the dangers of solo kayaking in remote, shark-populated waters. His name became a symbol of both the allure and the risks of seeking adventure in the wild, a tragic end to someone whose love of nature ultimately led him to a violent fate. Icebound Cove Park, located in Alaska, is a vast wilderness known for its icy fjords, towering glaciers, and abundant wildlife. It's one of the best places in the world to see orcas, the ocean's apex predators. These black and white giants, sometimes called killer whales, are known for their intelligence, speed, and complex social behavior. Pods of orcas roam the icy waters here, hunting seals, fish, and even larger prey like whales. In July 2024, marine biologist Lucas Hensley set out to kayak in these waters as part of his research on the park's ecosystem. It was supposed to be a peaceful day of observation and note-taking. That morning, July 15, 2024, Lucas loaded his kayak with gear. He had packed food, a waterproof notebook, and a dry bag containing emergency supplies. As a scientist studying marine life, Lucas had spent years in the field observing everything from humpback whales to sea lions. This trip was part of a larger project to document the behavior of orcas in Icebound Cove. The weather was calm, and the water mirrored the surrounding glaciers. It seemed like the perfect day for research. By 8 a.m., Lucas paddled away from the small boat that had dropped him off. He planned to spend several hours navigating the quieter inlets of the bay, where orcas were often spotted hunting for food. He was alone, but Lucas was used to solitude in the field. As he paddled, he scanned the water for movement, jotting notes whenever he saw seals sunbathing on ice floes or schools of fish swimming beneath the surface. A little after 10 a.m., Lucas noticed something unusual. In the distance, a pod of orcas surfaced, their dorsal fins slicing through the water. He stopped paddling and watched as they moved together, their movements synchronized. Orcas are highly social animals, often traveling in family groups called pods. This pod was hunting, their sharp movements hinting at a coordinated effort. Lucas kept a safe distance, observing them through his binoculars. But as he watched the pod, he failed to notice one orca that had split from the group. It moved silently, its dark body blending into the water. Lucas only realized something was wrong when he felt a sudden, powerful jolt. The kayak shook violently, nearly tipping over. He froze, looking down at the water. A massive orca had rammed the side of the kayak. Its sleek body rolled beneath him, and he saw the distinct white patches near its eyes. It wasn't playing. This was a direct strike. Before Lucas could react, the orca rammed the kayak again, this time harder. The kayak tipped over, sending him crashing into the icy water. The shock of the cold took his breath away. His arms flailed as he struggled to surface, his heavy clothing dragging him down. The kayak, now upside down, drifted a few feet away. Lucas trod water, gasping as his body adjusted to the freezing temperature. The orca circled him, its dorsal fin cutting through the water like a knife. Lucas knew orcas rarely attack humans, but this one's behavior was different. It wasn't swimming away. It was curious, its massive body moving closer with each pass. Lucas kicked his legs to stay afloat, but the cold was sapping his strength. The orca disappeared beneath the surface and Lucas panicked. He turned in every direction, searching for the massive predator. Seconds later, it surfaced just a few feet away, spraying water from its blowhole. Lucas scrambled toward a nearby ice floe, using every ounce of strength he had left. The ice was slick and uneven, but he pulled himself halfway onto it. His hands burned from the cold as he gripped the edge, trying to steady himself. The orca didn't leave. It circled the ice floe, nudging it gently as if testing its stability. Lucas lay flat, his chest heaving as he tried to catch his breath. He felt a sharp pain in his ribs where the kayak had struck him during the capsizing. His left leg throbbed from where it had slammed against the side of the kayak during the attack. Blood seeped through his wetsuit, and he realized he must have been cut during the struggle. The orca's head emerged from the water, its black eyes locked onto Lucas, its mouth partially open, revealing rows of sharp teeth. Lucas could hear the clicking sounds of its echolocation, a rapid series of clicks and whistles that orcas use to communicate and hunt. It was studying him, trying to understand what he was. Lucas stayed as still as possible, his heart pounding. He hoped the orca would lose interest, but it rammed the ice floe, nearly knocking him off. He grabbed onto a jagged piece of ice, his fingers numb from the cold. The orca dove again, disappearing into the deep. Lucas knew it could return at any moment. Minutes felt like hours as Lucas clung to the ice. His body was shaking uncontrollably, the cold creeping into his bones. He tried to focus on his breathing, keeping his movements slow to conserve energy. He looked around, hoping to spot a boat or another kayaker. But the bay was empty. He was alone with the orca. When the orca resurfaced, it was further away. It seemed to lose interest, swimming in wider circles before finally heading back toward the pod. Lucas watched as its dorsal fin disappeared into the distance. Relief washed over him, but he knew he wasn't safe yet. The cold was unbearable, and his injuries were severe. Lucas pulled himself entirely onto the ice floe using his strength. He fumbled for the emergency whistle in his jacket pocket, blowing it as loud as possible. The sound echoed across the bay. Minutes later, he heard the faint hum of a boat engine. A rescue crew spotted him, pulling him aboard and wrapping him in blankets. Lucas survived the attack, but his body was battered. His ribs were bruised, his leg was cut deeply, and his hands were swollen from frostbite. The encounter shook him, a rare and terrifying reminder of how unpredictable nature can be. The vast expanse of the Arctic spread out in a white wilderness, a landscape so untouched and pristine that it seemed otherworldly. Here, on a remote island encased in ice and snow, Alex, a dedicated documentary filmmaker, had set up his base camp. His mission was to capture the elusive and intimate moments of a colony of seals during mating season. This endeavor promised rare and breathtaking footage. With his camera gear meticulously checked and survival equipment stowed away, Alex embarked on what he hoped would be a career-defining project. The seals were gathered on a vast stretch of frozen shoreline, their slick bodies contrasting sharply against the snow-covered ground. Few humans had ever witnessed this sight firsthand. The seals were busy with ritualistic displays and vocalizations, oblivious to the biting cold and howling winds that swept across the ice. Alex, bundled in layers of thermal gear, carefully navigated the treacherous terrain, his camera capturing the intricate dance of nature. Days passed in a blur of icy winds and breathtaking scenes. Alex became a silent observer, blending into the landscape, his presence barely noted by the seals. The camera's lens allowed him to see the world from a perspective few ever experienced, capturing the raw beauty and harsh realities of life in the Arctic. He documented the nurturing bond between mothers and their pups, the playful antics of younger seals, and the majestic yet brutal battles between males vying for dominance. One frigid morning, as the pale sun barely peeked over the horizon, Alex spotted a massive male seal that seemed to command the attention of the entire colony. This alpha male was an awe-inspiring figure with battle scars etched into his thick hide. Alex knew that getting footage of this dominant seal would be a highlight of his documentary. He approached cautiously, mindful of the animal's territorial nature. Sensing an unfamiliar presence, the alpha male lifted its head and locked eyes with Alex. The filmmaker's heart pounded as he continued to film, inching closer for a better shot. He knew the risks, but was driven by the promise of capturing something extraordinary. Suddenly the seal bellowed, a deep, resonant sound that echoed across the ice. It was a warning, clear and unmistakable. Before Alex could react, the massive seal charged, its bulk moving slowly across the frozen ground. Alex's instinct for self-preservation kicked in. He swung his camera, hoping to deter the animal. The seal's attack was relentless, and the camera equipment offered little protection. Alex stumbled, falling hard onto the ice. Pain shot through his leg where the seal's powerful jaws had clamped down, tearing through his thick clothing. Desperation surged through him as he used his tripod to fend off the aggressive seal, each movement a struggle against the searing pain and rising panic. He knew he had to get away, to put distance between himself and the enraged animal. With great effort, he scrambled to his feet, using the tripod to keep the seal at bay as he backed away slowly. The alpha male eventually relented, returning to its territory, but the damage was done. Alex's leg throbbed with pain, the cold seeping into his bones through the torn fabric. The journey back to camp was an agonizing test of endurance and willpower. The extreme cold gnawed at him, sapping his strength and clarity. Though designed for the harsh conditions, his survival gear offered little solace against the pain radiating from his leg. Each step was a battle, his breath forming vapor clouds in the frigid air. Navigating the icy landscape was treacherous. The once familiar terrain seemed like a labyrinth, and each snowdrift and ice formation was a potential hazard. Alex relied on his survival skills, honed over years of filming in extreme environments. The sky darkened, the brief Arctic day giving way to a long, frigid night. Alex knew that stopping was not an option. If he paused, the cold would claim him. He pressed on, his mind focused on reaching his camp. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Alex spotted the outline of his base camp. Relief flooded through him, giving him a final burst of energy. He staggered into the camp, collapsing near his tent. With trembling hands, he unpacked his first aid kit and began treating his wounds. The bite marks were deep, and infection was a real risk in the harsh conditions. He cleaned the wounds as best he could, applying antiseptic and bandages. The pain was relentless, but Alex knew he couldn't afford to rest. He needed to secure the camp against the cold and ensure he had enough supplies to last until help could arrive. He activated his emergency beacon, a signal that would alert the nearest rescue station to his predicament. The next few days were a blur of pain and cold. Alex rationed his food and water, careful not to overexert himself. As he waited, Alex reflected on the events that had brought him to this point. The attack had been a harsh reminder of the raw power of nature, of the thin line between observer and participant in the wild. He had always known the risks, but experiencing them firsthand was a sobering lesson. Yet despite the pain and fear, he deeply respected the alpha male seal. It had been defending its territory, following instincts honed over millennia of survival in one of the harshest environments on Earth. As Alex's strength waned and hope began to dim on the fifth day, he heard the distant hum of an approaching aircraft. The sound grew louder, cutting through the wind. He staggered out of his tent, waving a brightly colored fabric to signal his location. The rescue team descended their presence, a beacon of hope in the frozen wasteland. They quickly assessed his condition, their faces a mix of concern and determination. Alex was lifted into the helicopter. The cabin's warmth starkly contrasted with the biting cold outside. He looked over the vast Arctic landscape as they flew towards the nearest medical facility. The experience had been harrowing, but he had survived. His footage would tell the story of the seals, their fierce beauty, and the challenges they faced in a changing world. In the contemporary fishing community of Kashega, Alaska, the sea remained a source of livelihood and a constant threat. The men and women who worked these waters respected the ocean's power. Still, they relied on its bounty to sustain their families. It was a life of hard work and uncertainty, where each trip could bring either fortune or disaster. The first sign of trouble came quietly, almost unnoticed. A fishing boat failed to return one evening. The Coast Guard was alerted and a search was initiated. They found the boat adrift, its crew of 4 missing. The vessel showed signs of damage, as if it had been struck by something large and powerful. The community mourned the loss, but accidents were not uncommon in these dangerous waters, so they forgot about them quickly. However, it happened again. Another boat was found wrecked, its crew of 3 missing and later found dead. The pattern became impossible to ignore as more boats were discovered and destroyed, and their crews were gone. When the number of fishermen killed was counted, it was up to 17 in just 3 months. This sent waves of fear and grief through Kashega. Theories and rumors spread like wildfire. Some blamed rogue waves, others spoke of a curse, while a few whispered about a monstrous sea creature. Desperation grew, and the local authorities and Coast Guard could not provide answers. The town needed help, someone who could decipher the mystery behind the tragedies. Enter Dr. Claire Roberts, a renowned marine biologist specializing in oceanography and sea creatures' behavior. Her arrival in Kashega was met with both hope and skepticism. Claire's reputation preceded her. In 2005, it happened in Santa Cruz, California, a beach town renowned for its beautiful coastline and lively surf culture. Thousands of visitors and locals flock to the Santa Cruz Beach Festival, which features live music, food trucks, surf competitions, and water sports every year. That particular day's weather was ideal, with bright blue skies, a gentle breeze, and the sun beaming off the Pacific. While many people had a happy and celebratory day, some would never forget the nightmare that unfolded that day. For many years, Santa Cruz has been a well-known beach resort. The town, whose history dates back many years, was formerly home to many fishermen but now prospers from tourism. The sea has always been a source of mystery and life for the people there. Due to the seals and sea lions that frequent the kelp forests nearby, great white sharks were known to live in these waters. Despite the sporadic sightings, shark attacks were uncommon, and most locals and tourists had grown accustomed to the ocean as a playground rather than a wilderness. That year's festival was incredibly crowded, drawing an estimated 10,000 people to the beach. The O'Connell family, Mark, a general contractor in the area, his wife Teresa, and their 2 teenage sons, Derek and Lucas, were among the attendees. Another person there was Kira Vance, a nearby San Jose college student who had come with her pals to enjoy the sun and possibly try paddleboarding. Although nobody could have foreseen the danger gradually approaching, a lifeguard team led by seasoned surf lifesaver Brad "Buzz" Garrison carefully watched the waters alongside them. As the afternoon wore on, a subtle shift started to show in the ocean. The people on the beach were unaware that a 14-foot great white shark had been lured nearer the coast. The normally tranquil waters had been disturbed by increased human activity and food waste thrown into the water during the festival. Although the warning signs were mostly ignored due to the festival noise and excitement, a few lifeguards noticed unusual behavior among the local seabirds. Things drastically changed in the evening. A local fisherman, Victor Polanski, saw the dark shadow moving beneath the surface while casting lines from a small nearby pier. He initially believed it to be a dolphin or a sizable school of fish, but the water revealed its distinct dorsal fin as it got closer. Victor's heart fell short. However, it was already too late when he finally radioed a warning to the lifeguards. A group of swimmers enjoyed the cool water in the shallows about 50 yards offshore. Among them were Kira Vance and her pals Derek and Lucas O'Donnell. They were unaware that danger was hiding under their feet. Before Kira could react, the water surrounding her turned red, signaling the first sign of trouble. She felt something brush against her leg. Swiftly striking a friend of Kira's who was bodyboarding, the shark's attack was swift. The attack's brutality and suddenness brought on an explosion of panic. The easygoing vibe of the festival was abruptly destroyed by screams that pierced the atmosphere. As they watched the horrifying scene play out, onlookers froze, some paralyzed with fear, and others running toward the shore in a last-ditch effort to escape the water. Buzz Garrison, a lifeguard tower nearby, heard the disturbance and quickly alerted the other guards with a whistle blow. Scurrying towards the water, he seized his rescue board. Troy Klein and Jesse Malone, 2 additional lifeguards, followed closely behind him. They knew how precious time was and how quickly the shark could strike again. The shark had vanished as soon as it appeared, and the water remained tainted when the lifeguards arrived. While Jesse and Troy assisted in guiding the swimmers still swimming back to the shore, Buzz helped Kira's injured friend onto his board. As everyone rushed to exit the water, tripping over beach chairs and towels hastily, the beach descended into chaos. Festival organizers attempted to restore order as parents cried out for their children, but the damage had already been done. Emergency personnel arrived in minutes, and the wounded were taken directly to the hospital. Regretfully, one of the victims passed away from their wounds before they could be stabilized, meaning they did not survive the attack. Before long, word of the shark attack at the Santa Cruz Beach Festival was circulating throughout the state. The town was in disbelief after that. Although shaken, the O'Connell family was relieved that Derek and Lucas had escaped unscathed. After witnessing her friends suffering in the water, Kira Vance battled survivor's guilt. Following the incident, numerous requests were made to local officials for improved shark activity monitoring, which raised major concerns about beach safety. A team of marine biologists, including Dr. Felicia Cortez of the Monterey Bay Aqua Park, was brought in to evaluate the situation. She explained that the shark was probably drawn closer to shore than it would have normally ventured because of the increased human activity and food waste. However, she warned against demonizing the creature, reminding people that sharks instinctively respond to their surroundings. The town council called multiple emergency sessions over the next few days to discuss avoiding another disaster. Others, like Dr. Cortez, pushed for stronger waste management regulations and improved public education about marine life. Some called for increased shark hunting to lower the local population. The council ultimately decided to enact additional safety measures, such as better lifeguard training for shark-related emergencies and the placement of shark detection buoys along the coastline. The attack deeply scarred Santa Cruz, and many people would never feel completely safe going to the beach again. but it also brought conservation efforts back into the public eye. Dr. Cortez collaborated extensively with neighborhood institutions and groups to spread awareness of sharks' value to the marine environment. Eventually, the community struck a new equilibrium between tourism and environmental conservation. The O'Connell family and Kira Vance would never forget that day. Previously a place of happiness and leisure, the beach had become a sobering reminder of how fleeting life can be. However, they also understood that the locals had banded together in its wake to defend the town's residents and its ocean, demonstrating Santa Cruz's tenacity. In the early hours of July 2012, a dense fog blanketed the Pacific Ocean just off the coast of Monterey, California. Fishermen like Tomer Tom Vandenberg, a seasoned saltwater angler in his late 50s, had called the town home for years. Monterey Bay's underwater canyons, teeming with life from schools of sardines to majestic whales, had long been a refuge for marine creatures. However, the once pristine waters had begun to show signs of environmental decline. Recently, runoff from an inland industrial plant had contaminated a nearby estuary. The contamination had brought about strange changes in marine behavior, but nobody had foreseen the threat that would soon surface from the depths. For more than 30 years, Tom Vandenberg had been fishing in these waters. He was a reclusive man known for his rough exterior and extensive sea knowledge. He preferred to be alone on his small boat, Sea Ghost, which had seen better days but remained in good working condition thanks to Tom's meticulous maintenance. As usual, Tom had put a sandwich in his tackle box and a thermos of coffee in his backpack before sunrise. For a man who had spent his life reading the ocean like a second language, the murky waters near the estuary were unsettling even though the air was excellent and the sea was calm. He was on his way to a place he loved, a shallow reef where fish were plentiful before pollution began to seep in. Tom had hoped that the recent rains would have washed away some of the toxins, making today more productive. As he cast his line, the bait, chopped sardines and mackerel, floated on the water with the fish oil from the chunks dispersing in the currents. Tom was unaware that something much more dangerous than the bait's scent had drawn in the typical fish. The first sign of trouble came with a slight jerk as if something heavy had pushed it from below. Tom looked over the side of the Sea Ghost and scowled, speculating that it might have been a fallen log or trash from the contaminated estuary. There were odd ripples in the water, but nothing else seemed off. He brushed it off and threw his line once more. A few minutes later, the boat's violent shuddering nearly knocked Tom off his feet. Grasping the side railing for balance, he gazed into the water. He then noticed a big, dark shadow moving just below the surface. Tom initially believed the shape to be that of a seal or dolphin, but it was too angular and frightening. His stomach constricted with uneasiness. In recent months, other fishermen had told him about odd shark sightings near the estuary. Known for their aggression and ability to adapt to fresh and salt water, bull sharks had been observed further north than usual, most likely due to shifting water conditions. Tom had never expected to encounter one so close to the coast. His heart raced as the shadow circled the boat. Panicked, he rushed to reel in his line, but the ship lurched again from a powerful impact below. This time, Tom saw the bull shark, at least 10 feet long, its pale underbelly flashing through the murky water. This wasn't just any ordinary shark. The scent of the bait heightened its predatory instincts, and the pollution had driven it closer to shore, where it was now attacking the Sea Ghost. As Tom became aware of how serious the situation was, his heartbeat accelerated. He fumbled the handset, sending it clattering to the deck while reaching for the radio in panic. With enough force to tilt the small boat dangerously to one side, the shark's powerful body slammed into the hull. Tom frantically tried to get the radio to work, but before he could call for help, the shark struck again, breaking through the surface in a harrowing demonstration of its unbridled might. Tom staggered backward, barely avoiding the bull shark's razor-sharp teeth as its jaws snapped shut inches from his legs. Determined to overturn the boat and seize its prey, the shark thrashed violently in the water, rolling its cold, lifeless eyes back. To keep the ship upright for what seemed like hours, Tom used a fishing gaff to repel the shark's constant attacks. His arms burned from the effort, and the Sea Ghost moaned and creaked under the strain. Although hard work was nothing new to him, this was different. This was a fight for survival. Each time the shark lunged, Tom swung the gaff and struck its muzzle to fend it off. The shark's erratic behavior could have resulted from toxins it had consumed from the contaminated waters. Just as Tom was about to lose his strength, he heard a distant hum, the sound of an engine from another boat. He saw a small fishing trawler approaching, its crew frantically waving. When he saw the familiar faces of fellow fishermen Gideon Fawkes and Alaric Cruz, whom he had known for years, a wave of relief washed over him as the boat drew near. They had come to investigate the disturbance after observing it from a distance. The shark finally ceased its attack and disappeared into the murky depths, seemingly deterred by the presence of the larger boat. As Gideon and Alaric pulled their boat alongside the Sea Ghost and helped Tom on board, he collapsed onto the deck, struggling to breathe. Despite his sweat-soaked body and trembling hands, he was still alive. Tom told a small group of fishermen who had gathered to hear his story about the terrifying experience he had just returned from at the Monterey docks. The attack had severely shaken him, but it also served as a sobering reminder of the region's escalating environmental crisis. In addition to driving fish away, the pollution in the estuary had altered the behavior of the predators living beneath the surface. The experience permanently damaged Tom Vandenberg's body and mind. In the following years, he became an outspoken advocate for more stringent environmental laws and never returned to that fishing spot near the estuary. Although he could not fully express how the attack had changed him, he was sure that the sea he had known his entire life was shifting, and not positively. Once a fisherman's paradise, Monterey waters were now a place of unpredictable danger. Tom would be haunted by the image of that bull shark for the rest of his life. It was September 22, 2007, and Tom Garrison was alone on his small lobster boat just off the coast of Maine. The morning had been routine so far, like many before. Tom had been a lobsterman for over 20 years, making a living pulling in traps from the cold waters of the North Atlantic. He knew the waters well, every hidden rock and stretch of coastline familiar to him. The traps were full today, and the catch was promising. So Tom worked efficiently, hoisting the cages from the depths, checking for lobsters, and resetting the traps. The sky was overcast, a typical day for Maine, but the waters were calm enough for a smooth haul. Tom felt comfortable and secure in his routine, paying little attention to the surroundings as he focused on his work. He hummed as he pulled up another cage, heavy with struggling lobsters. He leaned over the edge of his boat to untangle the trap when the ship rocked unexpectedly. At first, Tom thought it was just a strong wave, but then the ship jolted harder this time, nearly knocking him off balance. Puzzled, Tom looked out over the side, and that's when he saw the dark shape circling the boat. It was a bull shark, much larger than any fish he had encountered in these waters. Bull sharks weren't common here, but with warming waters and shifting marine life patterns, they had started showing up more often in New England waters. Bull sharks were aggressive and known for their unpredictable behavior, and this one seemed drawn to the struggling lobsters. Before Tom could react, the shark rammed the side of the boat with alarming force. The ship lurched violently, and Tom scrambled to keep his footing. His heart began to race as the reality of the situation hit him. The shark wasn't just investigating the boat, it was attacking it. Tom had heard stories of sharks becoming aggressive around fishing boats, but he never imagined it would happen to him. Another hit from the shark sent Tom sprawling onto the deck, and before he could get back on his feet, the boat tipped sharply to one side. Suddenly, Tom lost his grip and was thrown overboard, crashing into the icy water below. He surfaced quickly, gasping for air, the cold taking his breath away as the realization of his situation sank in. The bull shark was still circling, drawn by the commotion and the scent of the lobsters in the water. Tom knew he was in immediate danger. Now, rocking without control, the boat drifted away from him, and the shark was closing in. Tom's survival instincts kicked in, and he tried to stay calm, but he could feel the raw fear rising inside him as the predator moved closer. He glanced around, looking for anything that could help. His boat was too far to reach quickly, and the shore was distant, a faint outline through the misty air. The bull shark passed underneath him, its massive shadow sending a jolt of panic through his body. Tom knew that bull sharks were not only fast but also extremely territorial. He had to act fast. Tom kicked his legs, trying to stay afloat, but every movement drew the shark's attention. The water churned as the shark turned sharply, its dorsal fin cutting through the surface as it returned toward him. Tom knew he couldn't outswim it. His only chance was to outmaneuver it. He had spent his life on these waters, and knew erratic movements could distract sharks. He thrashed his arms in the water, creating as much turbulence as possible, hoping to confuse the predator long enough to buy himself some time. The shark circled him closer this time. Tom felt the displacement of water as it swam just beneath him, its powerful body sending waves that rocked him. Then, without warning, the shark lunged. Tom twisted his body, narrowly avoiding the open jaws, but the shark grazed his side, leaving a deep scratch on his leg. The pain shot through him, but there was no time to think about it. He kicked hard, swimming for the boat. The shark wasn't done. It came at him again, this time from below, and Tom felt the force of its body as it rammed into him, pushing him back under the water. He struggled to resurface, his lungs burning as he fought to stay above the surface. The boat drifted farther away, but Tom couldn't focus on that. He had to keep the shark at bay. In desperation, Tom reached out for anything to defend himself. His hands found a piece of debris floating nearby, a wooden plank from his boat. As the shark made another pass, he swung the plank with all his strength, striking the shark on the nose. The shark recoiled, momentarily stunned, but it was far from retreating. Tom knew he had only seconds before it attacked again. Summoning the last of his strength, Tom began swimming toward the boat, the plank still clutched in his hand. The cold water sapped his energy, but he pushed on, knowing it was his only chance. Behind him, the shark circled again, but its movements had slowed, the blow to its nose having thrown it off for the moment. Tom finally reached the side of his boat and hauled himself aboard with every ounce of strength he had left. He collapsed onto the deck, gasping for air, his body shaking from the cold and the adrenaline. The shark passed by the boat, its dark shape visible beneath the surface, before slowly disappearing into the depths. Tom lay on the deck, his leg bleeding and his body exhausted, but he was alive. The bull shark had come terrifyingly close, but he had outlasted it. As he lay there, catching his breath, he realized how close he had come to becoming another story in the news. A reminder that danger could appear without warning, even in the waters he had known his whole life. The northern coast of California is rugged and wild, with jagged cliffs, hidden coves, and deep waters. This area, known for its abundant marine life, also attracts one of the ocean's most powerful predators, the great white shark. These sharks, which can grow up to 20 feet long, thrive in these waters, feeding on seals, sea lions, and fish. They are a common sight for fishermen and divers, but encounters rarely escalate. For Michael Braxton, a 46-year-old fisherman from Eureka, California, the remote coves were his favorite spots to spend quiet days fishing. On September 12, 2024, he headed to Shelter Cove, hoping for another productive trip. Michael woke early, loading his small fishing boat with gear, bait, and enough supplies for a long day on the water. He was experienced, having spent years fishing along the California coast. Shelter Cove, tucked away far from crowded beaches, had always been one of his preferred spots. It was quiet, with few boats and plenty of fish to catch. By 7 a.m., Michael launched his Seawind boat into the cove's deep blue waters. The day started peacefully. Michael navigated past the rocky shoreline to deeper water, where fish were more plentiful. He dropped anchor about a mile offshore, adjusted his lines, and cast his bait. The ocean was calm, with only the occasional cry of a seagull or splash of a fish breaking the silence. Hours passed as he reeled in a few smaller catches, releasing most of them into the water. Around noon, he felt a stronger tug on his line, something big. Excited, Michael stood and began reeling in the line, the rod bending under the weight of the fish. The fight was intense, the fish pulling hard as Michael worked to bring it closer to the boat. He leaned over the side, straining to keep control of the line. That's when it happened. From the depths, a massive great white shark lunged toward the surface. Its wide jaws snapped shut on the fish Michael was reeling in, yanking the rod violently. The sudden force pulled Michael off balance and he slammed against the side of the boat. Before he could react, the shark reappeared, its body breaking the surface. It wasn't after the fish anymore. It was after him. The shark lunged again, its massive head striking the side of the boat. Michael lost his footing and fell into the water. The cold ocean shocked his body as he surfaced, gasping for air. He looked around frantically, trying to locate the shark. He saw it a few feet away, its dorsal fin cutting through the water like a knife. It turned sharply and came straight at him. Before Michael could move, the shark bit into his right leg. The pain was instant and overwhelming as the shark's teeth tore through muscle and bone. Michael screamed, kicking at the shark with his free leg. Blood clouded the water around him, but he didn't stop fighting. He punched the shark's snout, desperate to make it let go. The shark released him momentarily, its massive body thrashing as it circled back. Michael knew he had to get out of the water fast. His injured leg was useless, and every movement sent sharp pain shooting through his body. Using his arms, he swam toward the boat, which was only a few feet away. The shark circled him, its black eyes locked on its prey. Michael grabbed the edge of the ship, pulling himself halfway up. His strength was fading, but he managed to haul his body over the side and collapse onto the deck. He didn't have time to rest. The shark rammed the boat again, causing it to rock violently. Michael scrambled to the center of the deck, clutching his bleeding leg. Blood pooled around him, and he knew the scent would only draw the shark closer. He reached for his emergency kit, pulling out a tourniquet and tying it tightly around his thigh. The pain was excruciating, but it slowed the bleeding. The shark circled the boat, occasionally bumping it as if testing its strength. Michael's breaths came in short gasps as he struggled to think clearly. His radio was mounted near the controls on the other side of the boat. He crawled toward it, leaving a trail of blood behind. With shaking hands, he grabbed the microphone and called for help, giving his location and describing the attack. The minutes that followed felt like hours. Michael kept his eyes on the water, watching as the dorsal fin disappeared and reappeared. At one point, the shark launched partially out of the water, slamming into the side of the boat. The impact nearly knocked Michael overboard, but he held onto the railing, his heart pounding. Just when Michael thought he couldn't hold on any longer, he heard the faint sound of a helicopter. He looked up and saw the Coast Guard's bright orange chopper approaching. Relief washed over him, but the danger wasn't over. The shark was still circling and Michael's injuries were severe. The helicopter hovered above, lowering a rescue swimmer into the water. The swimmer signaled to Michael, then carefully approached the boat. The shark, sensing the commotion, moved closer. The swimmer climbed aboard, assessed Michael's injuries, and secured him in a harness. Together, they were lifted into the helicopter, leaving the shark behind. As the helicopter flew toward the nearest hospital, Michael drifted in and out of consciousness. His leg throbbed, and his body was cold from blood loss, but he was alive. The shark attack, happening in such a remote cove, raised questions among researchers and fishermen about the behavior of great whites in less frequented waters. It was a stark reminder of the risks of venturing into the ocean's domain for Michael.